The newly formed South African government is getting tough on illegal immigration. The country's coalition government has made immigration reform a priority since coming into power. In recent weeks, government agencies have been cracking down on restaurants and foreign-owned businesses in Johannesburg. But immigration groups are worried that the crackdown could fuel anti-immigrant sentiment in the country. My colleague Diane Hawker has more on this.
An immigration raid on a restaurant in Johannesburg. Labour Department and Home Affairs officials inspect the establishment for safety violations and undocumented workers. The Department of Home Affairs, which manages borders and immigration, has said it will increase these types of inspections by 50% in the next year in all sectors known to hire migrant workers. It's part of a broader government plan to reduce illegal immigration.
We have to make sure, in fact, that we have continuous ability to track and monitor and audit the number of illegal immigrants in South Africa. So we know the world is dealing with various crises. We've got wars, we've got conflicts, we've got migration issues everywhere. But you can't just leave Africa and forget about migration in this continent, and specifically in the case of South Africa as a big receiver.
In the post-apartheid era, South Africa was seen as a haven for migrants from the rest of the continent. Many who come here are seeking asylum from persecution in their home countries. But South Africa's economy has been stretched for years, experiencing low growth and high levels of joblessness. The mood has changed.
Go and report to the president and the executive that they must put South African first in our schools. Employment, the informal sector must be reserved for South Africans. We are not asking the government, we are demanding it, we are commanding you.
Anti-immigrant groups believe a crackdown on immigration will help solve some of these issues. And despite legislators' latest proposals, these groups believe the government needs even stricter regulations, including closing down foreign-owned shops and barring some industries from hiring migrants completely. In the past few months, several new so-called patriotic organizations have cropped up, and they say that they want to, quote, reclaim South Africa from illegal immigrants. It's a trend that has caused concern in the local migrant community, and they are worried that it will fuel a xenophobic wave here in South Africa. Migrants here are also worried that raids done by local government agencies are going to fuel an anti-immigrant sentiment. Immigrant groups and local anti-xenophobia organizations recently held a rally in Cape Town to push back against what they see as xenophobic lawmaking.
We now see that politicians are using xenophobic rhetoric as a means to get votes, and we see this across the world. It's not necessarily just in South Africa, but we as South Africans have a responsibility to say that not in our name and not all of us.
South Africa is known as a rainbow nation. It doesn't matter where you're from. As long as you reside in South Africa, the same rights should be applied to you as well.
South Africa doesn't have any reliable statistics on illegal migration, but the government says it deports between 15 and 20,000 undocumented migrants a year. The recent government crackdown and growing anti-immigrant sentiment could change the country's image as a place of safety for other Africans.
Right. I spoke to Dr. Hlengiwe Ndhlovu, political analyst and senior lecturer at the Wits School of Governance in South Africa. I asked her what makes this different from previous crackdowns.
Well, you will know that, issues of immigration and undocumented immigrants in particular within the South African context, they've been resurfacing, not only in South Africa, though, but also across. And you know that there is a need, just after the renewal of the permits for special permits for the people from Zimbabwe, as well as the people from Lesotho, it is important that the government does know who is in the country and what is their status and all of that. So it becomes very important that, the new minister coming into the office get on top of that as a matter of priority.
It is very easy to dismiss some of the major reasons people give for being against illegal immigration. But they have a point, don't they? Because they're saying that, migrants are, overburdening infrastructure, healthcare. They're also taking away local jobs. Isn't that good enough reason to keep them away?
Well, I don't think so, and I don't think migrants are necessarily doing all that. But you'll understand that we are in a global recession phase. Many economies across the world are struggling, and as they are struggling, for local communities and local citizens, sometimes they get to that point where they get to blame migrants if they are not seeing any economic progress and opportunities in their countries. But in actual fact, it's not that that's what the migrants are doing. It's about the strain on the resources and the government not being able to deliver the basic services as they are supposed to. So you will always have those spillover effects, not only in South Africa, but globally.
Okay, so you're basically saying it's sort of an easy excuse to blame migrants, but you're putting the responsibility on the government to make sure that there's more than enough for people on the ground. We're talking about immigrants. What more can you tell us about where they are from, why they're coming into South Africa especially?
Well, so the immigrants that we are having, especially in South Africa, they are all over the world. And, some of them even are coming, from Europe and America. Of course, they'll be classified differently accordingly. And some are coming as far as West Africa and East Africa, all those countries they are in South Africa. But the ones that, we are problematizing right now, or maybe we are talking about right now, are the immigrants who are closer, to the borders of South Africa. The immigrants, are from Zimbabwe and Lesotho because of the proximity of their countries and the economic downturns in those countries coming to South Africa. And because it's easier for them, to cross just one border into the country without documentation or with temporal, allowance. So it's difficult for people perhaps coming from West Africa because they will have to maneuver a whole lot of hindrances to get to the country. But with those that are closer to the border, that's why we have this prevalence and special permits for Zimbabwe and Lesotho. Right.
Now, while there may be actual illegal migrants in South Africa, isn't it also the case that many of those tagged as illegal migrants are actual asylum seekers waiting to be processed? That's a huge asylum-seeking backlog in South Africa, isn't it?
Well, of course, there is a huge asylum-seeking backlog in South Africa, but also you must remember that the most time where we had the biggest number in terms of asylum seeking, it was when there was actual political violence, especially in Zimbabwe, that was overt and it was reported internationally. But currently, it also becomes difficult in terms of establishing who's an asylum seeker and who's not. And these processes, they will obviously take time because there are facts that need to be brought to the table as everyone needs a fair process of documentation.
Right. What impact could this crackdown have on South Africa's economy? How important really are migrant workers?
Well, migrant workers are very important for any other economy and not just South Africa. And because we know, even if you go to wherever, you'll find them at the restaurant, the care labor industry, and all of those, is them who are working. And because these industries are relying mostly on this cheap, underpaid labor and hence occupied by migrants. You have heard, if you've been following the news, that even the owners of the restaurants in South Africa have been complaining about that, saying, their employees are documented and all of that, but without having much, to produce as evidence. So it is definitely going to, affect the economy, because it also paints a bad picture for South Africa as a country internationally, but also, in terms of the impact on the ground when those jobs are lost and everything.
Right. Thank you very much for all the insights you've given us, Dr. Hlengiwe Ndhlovu, political analyst.